All right, good morning, Falcons. Today we are going to cover domain and range using interval notation. Domain and range with interval notation is no different than talking about domain and range of a function with an inequality, but simply interval notation is just another method for writing domain and range. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is that before maybe we said that the domain was that x cannot be uh, greater than -4, but had to be less than or equal to 10. And now we're going to say that with interval notation, we could determine that our domain just heads from -4 to 10. So as you can see, there are some differences with how we write the notation, but we're still talking about the exact same thing. In interval notation, there are 5 symbols that we need to know. We have to understand that we use open parentheses, okay? Now, if we take a look down here, it tells us that we use open parentheses when the value is not included in the graph. So if we're referring to a graph or a picture, this is an example of when we would refer to some open circles. The x or y values could approach that number, but it could never actually land there. So it is not plotting a closed circle. We used closed parentheses in interval notation when we refer to something that is included. So is part. Now, closed parentheses, also known as brackets, are the exact same thing. Sometimes in class you might refer to me calling them closed brackets. They are all one and the same, but this is when we would use a closed plotted circle on the graph. Okay. Now, in domain and range, when we were talking about the functions and the graphs with inequalities, we were never talking about infinity. We would just say that y is greater than or equal to 4. But when we talk about interval notation, we do bring in infinity and negative infinity. Okay. Now, when we use infinity and negative infinity, we always use parentheses. And the reason for this is because you can never actually approach infinity. Infinity is this vague kind of, if we want to call it this imaginary place that all these numbers that get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, or smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, that is where they head. So we can never actually plot a point and land there. Okay? And then the last symbol that we are going to be talking about is a union sign. Okay, whenever there is a break in the graph, we put the union sign in order for the function to join them together. So in the next video, when we go through some examples down below, you're going to see that there are some examples where a union sign is really needed because we have this graph, it's approaching a value, and then it stops, and then there's some empty space on your coordinate plane, and then it picks back up again. Okay, so for domain and range using interval notation, just to recap, we have these 5 vocabulary words that we are going to be using: parentheses, brackets, infinity, negative infinity, and union signs. And I actually think that we are going to enjoy interval notation just a little bit better than an inequality, just because we don't have to worry about less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or greater than signs. We don't have to write as much. As you can see, it's very simple and straightforward. So go ahead and head to the next section of these notes, and you'll find the next video that goes through this bottom example. Thanks.